film starts in a small village with a child named Heidi, and her father and mother are still dead and living with her young aunt, Didi. But Aunt Peggy has a job far from the village, and what is allowed is that she takes Heidi with her because they have no relative other than her grandfather. Dit is forced to take him, and grandfather lived in a secluded place. Even his relationship with his son, who died, was not as bad, but Didi has to let Heidi go to him. And by getting Didi and Heidi to the grandfather, Lima Beckens welcomes them and refuses that he is taking Heidi to expel them from his farm, but Didi degrades Grandpa in front of the reality, and Heidi walks in front of the house and tells her what she is afraid of, because Grandpa is not shaking her and walking, and Grandpa is very tired, and Heidi walks behind her aunt. But Heidi responds to him innocently and by telling him that her aunt does not support her. So Grandpa eggs and Heidi on the second day. Grandpa enters the barn and takes Heidi to drink milk, and then the priest takes her to the city, and there he tells him that he gives up any limit to adopt her because he doesn't want her. So the priest picks her up and keeps her beautiful and healthy. But during the time it is necessary, she prefers to live with him. And they say that his religious duty is that he takes care of his only granddaughter. So he knocked grandfather that he takes her home with him. And there is Heidi's question, if we sleep in the barn second? He tells her that it is possible to sleep anywhere she is, when he asked grandmothers to sleep on straw, and Bia agreed. She lovingly came down to cuddle him. And then Peggy, a child named Peter, and Lee Bacon, responsible for caring for sheep, told Lua to grandfather. He took her with him, stayed in the mountains, and comforted him from her. On the first day, Heidi stayed very simple, playing with the sheep, watching the scenery of the mountains and landscapes, being very simple. And Peter took advantage of her and took care of him, and he stole food from her bag. And they ate, and Heidi came back, and what she ate, he smiled if he was the one who ate it. Peter explained that he worked hard, but Heidi forbids him and lets what works like that. And Peter tells her that when they suffocate the milk pulp by selling them less, so Heidi tells him that she gave him a half to eat by selling her all. One day, if he beats them and abandons him, he promises her. And then Peter are very pleased that the structures of every day are beautiful food, and Heidi and Peter continue to spend time together every day. And Peter, strange animals and plants for the first time show them and be very pleased with the play and freedom that they feel. And Peter remains, and he remains upset that he is the only one who came back from the second. And Heidi got closer to her grandfather more, and because of her tenderness, it is clear that the grandfathers seemed to love her. And the second day, Heidi took care of her need, and Biker slept in the barn, so she grandfather. Peter told her a need about him, and what Heidi appreciates. The grandfather tells her that all that is said about rumors, and that in her hands, she decides to believe the one she hears. The one who shows and kills Heidi with words and early starts at home, and by preparing her grandfather before she sleeps and starts to relate to him more day after day, Heidi returns one day from the mountain. And what is the limit of others? And Heidi knows that Grandpa decided that she would prefer to live with him. And very joyfully, the lap and a piss. And one day Peter tells her that he can't come again other than in the spring, because he is a spirit. To school. So Heidi asked her grandfather that she also attends school, but her grandfather does not agree because of the distance, and enters the winter, and Heidi is not aware of enjoying her time, especially after Peter walked and walked, and her grandfather works for her, ski Arab, and continues their time. They are pizza on the ice, and Heidi remains very simple. Her grandfather skiing comes back to her, and she is on her back, and she is not able to walk on the snow, and Didi returns from the city, and there is no place left for Heidi. And with the spirit of the grandfather, who is fanatical about her, and tells her to walk. And the first thing that Heidi shows by hugging him and telling her that she met a big house Eisen's family, a little girl who remains a friend to their daughter, and by telling her that she appreciates learning and living a better life. So Heidi tells her that she is blessed here, and she does not want to let her grandfather go. And by loving, she walks with her eyes full of sadness, and they ride the train together. And Heidi stands in the last Arab in the train, and she spits on the mountains and says goodbye to her grandfather's house for the last time. And Peter returns alone to the grandfather's house, and there is a grandfather's prayer about Heidi, and he knows that her aunt. I took it from him. He ran quickly through the streets of the village, dressed like a madman, and he was turning on Heidi. But the people of the village, first thing they saw, they looked at him, and they talked loudly, and they begged to see Heidi. She preferred to live with a man in his costume, and Grandpa knows that he's late. And Heidi, and then the nanny, graduates with Heidi's uncle, and remains very upset and tells her that Heidi is not suitable for them. So she tells her uncle that Heidi is the request of the owner of the house, and tells her that she wants her share of the deal and to stay away from her niece in exchange for money, and with the promise of Didi Heidi and to take her service, and tell her that if she needs to return home at any time possible, she will come back, and tired the daughter of the owner of Nanny Heidi on the rules of the house, and it remains forbidden to run, walk, loud voice, or any movement in the house, telling her that it is what is refreshing to talk to the servants in the form of your honor and do not deal with them. On the second day, Heidi wakes up on the breakfast counter, and what she knows, she eats with the pendant or uses any of the travel tools and stays by drinking from the plate and eating with her hands. So the nanny takes her out and tells her to eat with the pendant, and Clara stays by trying to teach her to eat quietly, and then they walk together. Clara's father and Lee Bacon's costume includes a photo of Clara with her mother, and Clara remains in the photo standing on her legs. Heidi's eyes smiles. She is standing. And Clara tells her that after the death of her mother, he came to her once. By nature and by saying that Peter, her friend, told her that what is useful from education and that they are not going to benefit a need. The teacher's house is very nervous and complains about it. A different teacher answers Heidi, but the nanny is nagging him and bit him, that he does not know he teaches a little girl distorted letters. So the teacher, she is used to running, jumping, and living in the mountain. And by keeping everything she sees or different things in the palace, she tries to open the windows to see the mountains and her grandfather's house. But the windows are very strong and she can't move. And one day it requires from the butler, and his name is Sebastian. He opens the window for her and be a very kind and pleased person by treating her to him and me with a simple and modest way. Thanks to a chair so that she stands on it. And Heidi spits out of the window, and what she has in front of her is many houses, and Sebastian tells her that she needs to go to a high place, so that on the day of Heidi's graduation with Clara, they left the house, they read and went to the church, and they walked around the city markets, and he continued with their time, and he drove to the church, and with Heidi remaining, Clara had to leave in front of the door, and a door, because she was looking. Clara tells her that she is resting, and Heidi is looking for the highest place in the tower, but she is somewhat cold by exploring the mountains and kindly calls out to her grandfather, and she is very sad and misses her home, and he found her at the time, with the intervention of the nanny. Clara is dressed and her thoughts are sleeping, but she reacts that she is because she's never been able to show her grandfather or the mountain, and on the way home, they show Sebastian and Baru with them to the house. And there the nanny goes to Heidi, and she takes responsibility, and Clara stands up for her. So the nanny tells her that she has not entered into raising children, and early on she deprives Heidi of eating, and by letting her stand and waving to the wall as a punishment for her, and by calling Heidi very much, and by deciding to take off her dress and put on her old clothes and take her need and return to her grandfather. And by showing the nanny, Heidi tells her that her aunt told her that she could come home at any time, and the nanny tells her that her aunt was laughing at her and that she would never leave the house. And Clara shows Heidi, who is determined that she... But Clara is very tired because of sadness, and she feels that everyone around her loves her friend because her father is traveling all the time and what he is sitting with her. And by increasing her in her situation, and by apologizing to her, and by telling her that she is not interested in her, she loves by telling her that they are enjoying their time together. And finally, they remain very kind to Heidi. But the nanny complains about her and says that she is not suitable for Clara and that she does not know how to read and not even pronounce the letters kois. And that she was used to living in the wild with animals and she does not live in an upscale place, costume. So Grandma tells her that she judges her by herself. And Grandma interferes with Heidi before she sleeps and tells her a story about shepherding sheep and the wild life that Heidi lived in, and tells her the text of the story, so Heidi asked her to complete it, telling her grandfather that if she knew to read, she would appreciate herself. She knows the end of the story, and by completing the reading to some extent, she can pronounce all the letters and words correctly. And by attending the class with Clara, and between Baher, the very teacher, and Beckley, the whole family watches her. Why did they get rid of her bishop and Pishka? After a few days, the grandmother returns home, and before she walks, she tells her son that Heidi is very sad and friendly because she misses her home and her grandfather. But the father remains to see that Clara is happy to be there. So he decided to overlook Heidi's sadness in exchange for his daughter's happiness. And one night, hearing one of the services, palace door, however, father believes their story and tells them that the ghosts do not exist. But he asks the doctor to stay up with him so that they really make sure that the ghosts exist. And at night, they actually hear the sound of the door. And suddenly, I meet Heidi, and the doctor knows that she is walking while she is sleeping, and he leans back to put my clothes on the bed, and I wake up and ask about the dream that she was dreaming about. And Heidi tells him that she was dreaming about her grandfather. And he knows that she misses her home, and that she is suffering because of she preferred to stay away from her home. But Clara's father preferred to object that she was walking so that his daughter was walking with her. The doctor was careful. Bicep, he walked, and the father preferred to stay up all night thinking about his mother's words and Tenfor's words. And on the other, he decides that he is letting Heidi go home and stays with Clara. So he tells her, in Heidi's case, that she needs to return home. So he gives Clara very much and breaks every need before her. And the first thing that Heidi shows by shaking her and telling her to go home. And he found her and what she Clara thinks and looks forward to saying goodbye to her. And thanks to Heidi, she is confused. But Clara reluctantly says goodbye to her, and Heidi travels with the butler, who drives her to her village and walks, and the village people are happy. First thing they show Heidi is wearing 1046. On the way, by taking off the dress that was her prison, and with a sense of freedom, she runs through the vast lands, calling out to her grandfather loudly, and grandfather hears D, who does not believe himself, and running on her, and is sold out of joy. And they hug each other. And Heidi continues her life as she was with grandfather and Peter, and she is happy. And one day Heidi writes an answer to Clara by asking her to visit her. And at Clara's house, the grandmother stays by reading Heidi's answers. And Clara stays very sad and tired after Heidi walked out of the house, so her grandmother decided to take her to Heidi's house. And there is something 11:17. Heidi believes that Clara will sit with her and civilly. She is very simplified, and Heidi's grandfather sits with Clara's grandfather, who asks him to clear his mind of Clara, and she will give her to him as a day. And grandfather agrees and remains responsible, that he refers her to Heidi's clothes upstairs and takes her down. And Heidi and Clara sleep. And one day Peter decides that he is destroying the wheelchair by selling Clara, and he wants to take revenge on her. And Peter throws the wheelchair off the hill and runs away. And they all wake up, and the chair still sells. And they turned on him everywhere, and Grandpa knows that Peter is the reason. So he decided to take Clara all the way to some extent, to the place where Peter grazes sheep. And they say that he knows what his job is and asks him to clear his mind of the two girls and walk and show Clara, for the first time, the mountains that Heidi was always talking about and the beautiful life that she was hoping for. Clara feels that in a mattress on her legs, and there remains a strange sensation because she is supposed to lose feeling in her legs. So she tries to move her fingers, and philosophically, by leaning on the rock next to her, with the ability to stand, she enters her heart from the second after the death of her mother. And Heidi lives with her grandfather in the village and with the spirit of school, and she keeps repeating that she remains a story writer and wrote the first novel, which is the novel of her life.